Hello, everyone. Welcome to Spiritual Sunshine. Today, we are going to dive into the more and more well-known book, the Book of Enoch, and also reflect on the prophecies speaking about the coming heavenly paradise on earth. But no, we're not jumping into Revelation to do that. We're actually sticking with the Book of Enoch to see what this esoteric text has to say about the future coming of God. So yes, let's start with a reading, because the Book of Enoch can be quite a complicated book. In a way, we all have to approach it for ourselves. So we'll take a moment to meditate on the words of the Book of Enoch. And specifically, I'll be reading from the second book, so-called, in what we call the Book of Enoch nowadays. And that second book, which you'll find if you download the Book of Enoch within usually one file, is the parables. And the parables start with chapter 1, the first parable. And we'll be starting our reading from the fourth verse of that. The first parable. When the congregation of the righteous shall appear, and sinners shall be judged for their sins, and shall be driven from the face of the earth. And when the righteous one shall appear before the eyes of the righteous, whose elect works hang upon the Lord of spirits, the light shall appear to the righteous and the elect who dwell on the earth, where then will be the dwelling of the sinners, and where the resting place of those who have denied the Lord of spirits. It had been good for them if they had not been born. We're actually going to do a little bit more reading from this parable, but to begin, I like this connection to some of the ancient Hebrew texts that we see right immediately at the beginning of this parable, where it talks about these people would be better off if they weren't born. We also hear that from Christ when he talks about those who corrupt little children. I think there may be a connection here, because if we look at the ancient roots of these texts where it talks about those who should not have been born, we seem to always find a connection with abusing and hurting little children. Yes, funny enough, in the texts, we see this castigation, this condemnation of those who corrupt little children. In the Hebrew texts, it talks about how those who are corrupting so many people, that it would be better if not only were they not born, but if their children weren't born. And I have to say, the only reason pretty much any culture would come up with this idea that it would be better if these children weren't born is if the children are going through some really tough circumstances, some really deep abuse. And yes, we see that in the text. More personally, I think, if we look at the world today, we know, unfortunately, that there's a lot of rampant trafficking and abuse on the earth today. But we see it not only in the West, but throughout the world cultures. This corrupting influence has spread, and some of the powers that be have deep interest in, unfortunately, in hurting children. We can talk more about human trafficking. One of my earliest videos actually was on human trafficking 6-7 years ago. And interestingly enough, not much has changed. We haven't really shown a big spotlight on this, although recently there's more talk about it because of the crackdown at the border. Yes, so I'm a progressive guy, but I don't always stay in line with Democrats or anything like that. I think it's interesting that despite all the scary things that Trump may be doing, this enforcement of stopping immigration has led to a lot of light not just from Trump's mouth, but from many, a lot of light shown on the trafficking that's been going on into this country and the missing hundreds of thousands of kids over the last few years. And so, in terms of God coming to earth today, we can see in this prophecy that perhaps the Lord coming, the true Easter of culture, not just the yearly Easter, but the Easter of our earth, where all will be redeemed who need it, who accept it, who are willing to take the holiness of their higher self and embody it, and more specifically in this case, our children will be pulled from the clutches of those who hurt them. All those who are trafficked will be pulled out of those circumstances, and hopefully, as the texts say, all evil will be overcome. But in the meantime, there's a process of getting there, and that process may be a little full of fire, let's say. As we know in astrology, at least I think this is true, we're coming to an age of great change. This year and the next year, we see all the major planets, not just the dwarf planets, which are often included in astrology, but we see the outer planets in the solar system changing sign, which only happens so often, and then all together like this, only once every, thousands and thousands of years. And we see this process of the Earth and the solar system crossing the galactic center in this time as well. Happens to coincide, funny enough. And we also hear from Indian scholars about the change from the Kali Yuga to these higher epochs. And more specifically, personally, I've learned more about how at the end of the Kali Yuga, which is the darkest time in the cycle of the ages, the most corrupt and hurtful time, there's a 1200-year period of purification according to these cycles. A similar one happens at the end of all the more upwards leaning epochs. And that one happens to be around 12,000 years ago, where we see the younger Dryas and the crashing of global temperatures for around 1,200 years. And that one is said to be a cleansing by water and perhaps ice. So funny enough, we're on the flip side of that currently, it seems, where we're leaving the Kali Yuga, and now we have a time of cleansing, maybe personal cleansing by fire, by the trials of life. And I think we can see that already, right? If you really just look at the earth, whatever your political stance, whatever country you're from, if you know anything about the news around us, we see this there. We see a transformation. And although this 1200-year cycle is towards the positive, we know that a lot of these things take time, and there's a transition period. That's why it's 1200 years of cleansing before the first true age of higher modality of living. But thankfully, in this time of cleansing, we're opening to these higher powers, to our deeper natures. And as we allow ourselves to bloom, kind of like a seed in the wilderness that can only bloom when fire comes. And there are seeds like that will stay dormant for tens of years until a fire can allow them to sprout. And I think in a way, and we hear this from others as well, this analogy, that's happening today. That's happening in our own lives, perhaps. Hopefully, you feel that you're growing, maybe not by fire, maybe just through the natural mode of things. But if it is by fire, know that it's all serving this higher purpose. And so, that being said, in this prophecy, this first parable from Enoch, we hear that the Lord who's going to embody in humankind, that this righteous one who's appearing before the eyes of the righteous, that oneness, that unity that's going to appear to us, hanging upon the Lord of Spirits, it says, will bring a light on those who really, it would have been better if they weren't born because of the type of trial. Not only that they're, putting on other people, but actually the trial of their journey. A lot of times people who are murderous and abusive in really heinous ways and repeatable circumstances throughout their lives, they think that it's their victims who are getting the short end of the stick, but actually it's their own soul who's truly being limited. And so we see that in this text. And then going from there, when the secrets of the righteous shall be revealed and the sinners judged. So yes, we'll be shining light on the sinners and their actions will be judged. And I think we all, quote unquote, sin. I think even the word sin takes some unpacking. This is an English translation of a Hebrew text or what have you throughout our different religious bodies of texts. We see all kinds of words being translated to sin, right? And it can be different things. And in the biblical context, it's often, this word meaning kind of missing the mark. So we all have an element of that, of not living up to our potential yet, because that's what it means to grow. But when it's talking about those who are quote unquote sinners, especially when compared to the righteous, we're talking about those folks, those of us that center on domination and control and hurt. And I think it's a call for each of us to look at our own hearts and maybe judge ourselves a little in the sense of letting go of how we've been behaving, seeing it for what it is and letting go, so that we can perhaps call ourselves in harmony, call ourselves in tune with peace, and maybe feel that as well as the greatest marker of quote unquote righteousness. And it further says, and the godless driven from the presence of the righteous and elect. So yes, it kind of fits today, doesn't it? Where we see this call from these other prophecies, these other epochs described in history of this call for a culling, for a cleansing. And we don't know what that's going to look like. Maybe it's a cleansing, like an internal cleansing. Maybe no one, or relatively few people will actually be cleansed by some kind of instrument, whether it be fire or society imprisoning them or what have you. But whatever it is, we see this in the book of Enoch as a prophecy for when God is descending in the hearts and minds of the people here on earth. And this is verse 7. From that time, those that possess the earth shall no longer be powerful and exalted. Wow, that's beautiful, right? And it really does fit today, because we know more and more every day, if you're not sitting in your own silo of distorted news, you know that those who really control things are distorted themselves, are selfish and believe that power is everything. And we all have an element of that within our thinking and hearts. At least at some point in our past, we probably have had an element of that. And so being aware that we can be, and that others can be really centered on this, can be a very illuminating viewpoint, because it allows us to see how the machinations of society, maybe almost entirely behind the scenes, are actually meant to empower those who only want power. And we start to see that in the bigger things, that there's always excuses around why certain things can't be done, why these promises can never be kept. by certain political parties, by whoever. Those who speak a great game, we should be aware of when they can never, when they can never bring about those changes, because that's a telltale sign of corruption, of speaking from both sides of their mouths. And it doesn't matter how great they come across. It doesn't matter how beautiful their words, how eloquent their speech. Doesn't matter any of that. At the end of the day, because those things can be misleading, we have to, as the Bible says, look at the fruit of those folks, and not the fruit that they try to spin, but actually see if they ever really, truly, actually fulfill their promises, and keep them to their word. See how effective they are on a world stage and a personal stage. Further in verse 7. Well, let's reread that first part because it's such a great promise. From that time, from that time forward, from that time those that possess the earth shall no longer be powerful and exalted, and they shall not be able to behold the face of the holy. So they're not able to manipulate things. They're not able to misuse the good, the face of the holy. They're not able to actually be in the presence once this cycle is over. And we see that in the Vedic text, that once we reach these higher epochs, those that embody evil, that love evil, are no longer, running rampant in society. And it says, because or for the Lord of spirits has caused his light to appear on the face of the holy, righteous, and elect. So again, and they shall not be able to behold the face of the holy, for the Lord of spirits has caused his light to appear on the face of the holy, righteous, and elect. So the divine feminine, the divine masculine will come and embody itself in society, not necessarily as an individual, although we see in many prophecies about the Lord's coming. But maybe more importantly to a lot of us, right, that God's going to embody us in culture, in society. And God is infinite good diversity, right? We know that God is all good, all goodness and life. And so the Lord of spirits, coming to shine his light, it says, to appear on our faces, on those parts of us that are holy and righteous and elect, that part of us that's willing to embody our higher selves, which is the higher self for each of us, even those who embody evil in this life. Their highest self is holy, is divine, but they may not reach it in this life. They may have to go through a time of cleansing, of all their mental distortions being essentially wiped away, which you could call the second death, which you could call hell. Part of that's happening in this life for many of us, for many people, for them as well. But a lot of it could happen in the next life or whatever's coming next, before that consciousness that's at the root of all experience can bloom into greater heavenliness. Because the thing is, the light of God, which is the light of consciousness, which is life, can never be squashed in anyone. But the trappings of mind, which a lot of times we identify as, can change, right? We know it from ourselves, hopefully, that we can change. And so you could say that those people are going to be, put through the trial of fire until their root life and light can later bloom as another person. That old hellish person will be in the second death, as the Bible calls it. It'll be gone, and their true selves will eventually awaken. I believe that's true. But whether or not that's true, we know that the life that's within each of us is eternal. That light is also peaceful and heavenly, no matter what our minds get up to in this life. So beautiful from the book of Enoch. And then verse 8. Then shall the kings and the mighty perish and be given into the hands of the righteous and holy. So at that time, through this trial, perhaps the next 1200 years or so. Maybe, hopefully quicker. They say most of it's at the beginning, right? So hopefully quicker. Maybe a lot of it's going to be us helping other communities in the heavens overcome their oppressive forces. You never know, right? Because many of these Indian scholars, one in particular, I'll put his name in the description of this video on YouTube because I'm forgetting it right now. But I know he talks about how, but apparently this is from others that he's getting this from, talks about how the black hole in the middle of the galaxy is now emitting something new. And it's really marking this delineation from the end of the Kali Yuga to this phase of transitioning into higher planes of consciousness for the whole body of this earth. And so if that's true, and that there is this black hole in the middle of the galaxy emitting new light in coinciding with this new age and maybe even marking it, we'll see perhaps change not only on our planet, but throughout the solar system, throughout other solar systems as well. And it's not something that's just going to accidentally happen here or there, but it's actually the cosmic forces, God pulling us closer, so to speak, as Swedenborg might say, God shining further into the hearts and minds, influxing more into not just our planet, but the galaxy, and perhaps further, thanks to that transition. So who knows what's going to happen in these 1200 years, but it's saying here that, again, the king and the mighty, these corrupt influences, will perish at the hands of the righteous and holy. And we can only speculate what that means exactly. Verse 9, and thenceforward none shall seek for themselves mercy from the Lord of spirits, for their life is at an end. I think it's an interesting way of saying that maybe these kings or these evil folks will never seek mercy for the Lord. But I also think you could take it maybe even at face value that none shall seek the mercy of the Lord because their life is at an end. Because those who are evil, they're perished and maybe being transformed, or just gone, who knows. And those who are good, you could say that their sense of a limited life is at an end. As we hear from many of these scholars, what connotes these higher epochs, these more heavenly times coming, is a sense of unity where we no longer think of ourselves as having this separate life. Oh, Corey is doing this and he has this reputation and he's getting this done and he has the family and he has friends and he has these interests and these loves, etc., where it's just like, okay, this is about one person. No, instead we start to look at things almost purely from a unified sense of connectedness with not just humanity, but with nature, with all beings. And in that view, our individual lives are at an end because we know our eternality, we know our rightful place as a child of God. And that kind of leads me to something I wanted to talk about today around Christ calling himself a child of God, the Son of God, the Son of Man, and calling us children of God. In fact, Christ calls all of us children of God much more than he calls himself the Son of God, because does he ever call himself the Son of God? I think it's an interesting point to make that, in fact, if you really want to take Christ at his word, he called all of us, or called the part of us that's higher, that is hopefully willing to incarnate in this life, children of God. He says sometimes this is what you have to do to become children of God, and he also says sometimes you are children of God, so stop worrying about the future, etc. And I think it's beautiful that Christ spoke in this way, because although in Christian circles we can often make it more about believing in Christ, you have to believe in the name of Jesus Christ. We even say his name wrong, right? He would have never comes up Jesus. No, he wouldn't have, right? But we even say his name wrong when we say, oh, but anyone who doesn't get this name right is going to hell. It's really amazing, right? All the hypocrisy connected to it. I mean, it's almost too apparent. Whereas he said, you have to know me as the way, the truth, the life. And if you want to get into heaven, you have to become like children. Become like children. Do you see us, if we became like children, always getting the name of God right? No, in fact, the Bible calls God many names. Many names. Jehovah calls God El Shaddai, Elohim, which is a plural noun. So many names, right? And here we are in our hubris, saying that we have to be a specific type of Christian often to get into heaven. It's the opposite of Christ's message, actually. And so, as Christ said, we are children of God the more we're willing to live like children and not corrupt children, not corrupt those around us through abuse, through hate. And we do this to others, unfortunately, kind of naturally in the world today, because part of us wants control and part of us wants to see things a certain way. And we don't always think about that as abuse, right? We just think, I'm sharing my opinion with my wife. I'm sharing my opinion with my husband, with my friend, with my family member. Yeah, a little forcefully, but they don't have to do what I'm saying. But we know better right in the moment because we're demanding them to do what we say often. And often we're controlling because we think we own certain things, and we think that it has to be this way, otherwise, whatever the excuse is. Now, I will say sometimes we're behaving with zeal because we want to keep people safe, because we know there has to be a line, a protective line, because often people can step over that and break our boundaries this way, that way, and eventually we have to say something. But often it's just because we want some level of control over people. And that sense of control can become the key thing that we love. We can see it when we're angry all the time, when we're judgmental all the time. That's the part of our minds that we've come to think we are, that wants things to really be gone, because nothing can really live up to that part of our thinking. So we have to allow that part to get what it wants, and that's to itself be gone. We have to allow that part of our mind to be seen for what it is and to hold it in less esteem. In a sense, we have to become more detached by the way our mind thinks and what our mind is thinking about, and more in tune and at peace with that child of God that is like a child, because the younger you get, the less you're thinking and analyzing. You're just having fun. At some point, you didn't even know English or whatever language you're thinking in. And so you were just being. So that's really the core of what it means to be a child. It's just being and not overthinking. And so today it would behoove me, so to speak, to lean into that a little bit right here towards the end of our message today, where we just take a few moments not analyzing how things are going and allowing ourselves to just have that peace that is us. And so taking a moment, maybe coming more in tune with our breath, with our peace, with our life, with our light. And noting, some call this meditation, but it's actually our self. And so there's no limit to when we can tap into this light, this consciousness that is the present moment. because how else can you define the present moment than consciousness? You could be asleep. Present moment is consciousness, maybe a dream, maybe the subtleness of deep sleep. And if it's not conscious, then it doesn't exist for us, at least in terms of our experience. And in fact, our quantum science tells us that those things not held in consciousness in any given moment are nebulous, not actually material. They're vibrational and in many different states at once. And so it's a gift, as Christ said, a very light burden to allow yourself to see that Christ is the vine, whatever you want to call Christ. We are the branches, our minds, our bodies, our sense of ourselves, that's the branch. But the vine is the way. It's the truth. It's the life. As the Tao Te Ching indicates, the Tao is translated the way. And what does that also say? It says roll with the punches. It says roll with what life gives you. And don't take it so seriously. When you do something, forget it. Why is what the master does so great? Because when the master finishes doing something, she forgets all about it. Beautiful line from the Tao Te Ching. And although we can't hold our memory to that standard, our true nature, which is just the observational quality of life, isn't holding on to anything. It forgets immediately. And that part of us that sees our mind, sees our judgment, sees our thinking, our sense of self, can you say you see it? Can you say that you see the part of yourself that sees things? You might see a sense of yourself, but that's just a sense of who you are. You might see an idea of your body, or perhaps your body, or feel it. But again, that's an object arising in consciousness. Can you see where you're seeing from? Of course not. We take it for granted, like we take for granted our parents often, our rootedness on the earth, our society, but actually even more so God, the providence that allows for all beings to exist, all the circumstances, the accidents, the statistics that say this is rare that we are here. And indeed it is rare. They always like to point out that if the statistics were off just a little bit, this would be like this and everything would fall apart. And that happens on every level of creation, not, let alone our lives. Anything could kill us, right? All kinds of things could spell our doom, and yet here we are. And even those of us who have passed there, wherever they are, able to say, here I am. So it's never something we can live without. Indeed, even if there is no afterlife, you can never say you're here, but actually I'm dead and I'm not here. So it's not something to worry about. And indeed, the part of us that sees cannot worry. It accepts the foibles of what it means to seemingly be an individual. It accepts the worst circumstances. It sees a mind that doesn't like things, of course, but it just sees it. You just see your mind react, your feelings, your thoughts. You can't call yourself those feelings or thoughts. Something could happen to you, brain injury, and your thoughts totally change. Someone would say, oh, he's not himself anymore. She's not herself. But the true you is the observer of those things. And indeed, from that place of consciousness, you can't say that you're separate from anyone else, from anything else that arises. Because not only do they have consciousness just like yours, without quality, without the ability to be seen itself, but they also arise in your consciousness. And it's just our choice not to identify as everything we see, and instead to identify as what? Our minds, our bodies. You can't live without gravity. You can't live without the forces of magnetism, without the forces of molecules and atoms and all the things that keep your body together and your mind working. Little of which we know about. And at best, we just describe from an outside perspective. And so in our unity, we can relax, because that's what we are. We're relaxation, we're vibrancy, we're life, we're excitement, we're connectedness, because all these things happen within us. And even the painful things can be said to be part of the whole. Tools used to raise the vibration of everything else, like a scalpel cutting out a cancer, or a laser invigorating a metal. Like heat sharpening a blade. That is these passing modalities of what we call evil. Just a heat to be used by the Godhead, a fire to be directed towards what needs sharpening, what's ready to be sharpened, what's ready to be formed into a silver jewel with a gemstone at the middle, a golden heart, empowering the most subtle and beautiful machine you could imagine, called the universe, called your body. And so yes, no matter what's happening with us, we can find peace because we are peace. And to end with verse 10, and it shall come to pass in those days that elect and holy children will descend from the high heaven, and their seed will become one with the children of men. What a place to end, because we see this promise of heavenliness being further and further embodied, not just the heavenliness that we've known, but that from those from the high heaven, perhaps in heaven, maybe angels, maybe those who have passed, who have become angelic, coming back to seed our society with past cultures, with past insight, with past magic, so to speak, past science. Perhaps that's true. Perhaps the promises and the prophecies of all the elect being risen on the last days from throughout history is true, perhaps. Perhaps it's also those from the high heaven in the sense of aliens, in the sense of those from other star systems. I think maybe both are true. That those who've been watching us and those who have been connected to us and maybe seeding their animals, their DNA, whatever, their plant life on our planet as an experiment, as some people say, is described in the ancient texts. Whatever it is, their connection, perhaps these extraterrestrial, these beings from within the planet, from wherever you want to guess they might be from. Maybe you have firsthand experience. You never know. Perhaps they will be able to come and, yes, sow their seed, it says, with us, the children of man. Again, as Christ said, the Son of Man, the children of men will go through a lot of trials. And often we think he's talking just about himself. But if we look at the planet Earth, it's pretty clear he was talking about us too. And what was his promise for the Son of Man? Son of Man, the children of humanity, all of us, will go through trials, will be crucified and killed for our life, for our light. And I don't know about you, but it can feel like a lot of us have been through this trial, and many of us have passed, been crucified for being human, for just existing. But what happens on the third day? We will come back. We will be enlivened. We will be empowered. We will find our heavenliness, and it will increase forevermore. So amen to that. And thank you to the book of Enoch and to each of you for opening your book today, because you are truly a source, the source of divine good, divine life, divine truth. And don't let anyone tell you any different. Peace.